The evacuation ship broke through the smoke and fire of Eldoreth's atmosphere, rising into the endless black. From the window, Daniel Reeves saw the burning world below, towers collapsing, ships dueling in the sky, the once beautiful capital of the Varkari Empire falling apart in flames. Beside him, Princess Solara sat silent, her eyes reflecting the red glow of her dying world. She had lost everything: her kingdom, her family, her people's trust. Yet she didn't cry. She only whispered, "They have turned my wedding into a war." Daniel leaned against the wall, bruised and exhausted. "Happens more often than you'd think," he said quietly. "Politics pretending to be peace." Solara turned to him. "You speak as if you've seen this before." He gave a tired smile. Earth had its share of bloody peace treaties. Different stars, same story. The ship trembled as it passed through the upper atmosphere. The pilot, a frightened palace guard, and called back, "We're clear of the city, Princess. But rebel ships are on our tail." Daniel pushed himself up. "Weapons? Minimal. This is a transport craft." "Figures." He looked at Solara. "Do you trust me?" Her glowing eyes met his. "After what you did tonight?" "Yes," he grinned faintly. "Then hold on." He ran to the controls and pulled the manual override. The ship dove suddenly, engines screaming. Plasma bolts flashed past them, cutting through the clouds. Daniel spun the craft in a sharp arc, diving under a rebel frigate, then climbing again at full thrust. Solara gripped the chair, her voice tight. "You can fly?" Daniel smirked. "Used to. Back when humans still fought their own wars." He rolled the ship again, forcing the pursuing fighter into the path of debris. It exploded in a flash of blue fire. The second one followed, firing desperately. But Daniel sent the craft straight into an asteroid ring just above Eldoreth's moon. The dense rocks broke radar lock, and within minutes the rebels lost their trail. When silence returned, Daniel finally relaxed. "We're clear. For now." Solara looked at him with wonder. "You fly like someone who doesn't care about death." He chuckled softly. "I care. I just don't let it stop me." The ship drifted through the quiet void, lights flickering. Solara rose and moved toward the viewport, watching the stars. "I cannot go home. If I return, they'll kill me for treason. If I stay hidden, my people will think I abandoned them." Daniel walked beside her. "Then we find out who caused this. Someone planned that attack. It wasn't random." She looked up at him. "You would help me still?" He nodded. "Someone has to." Hours later, they reached the outer system, a wasteland of forgotten stations and mining colonies. Daniel guided the ship toward an old human outpost from the Orion Wars, half buried in ice on a small moon. It was abandoned, but still powered by ancient reactors. Inside, the lights flickered weakly as they entered. The air was cold and dry. Rusted metal corridors echoed with their steps. Daniel began searching through old terminals. If the rebels coordinated that attack, they used long-range signals. Maybe I can trace something through the old comm grid. Solara watched him work, her red eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You understand our technology?" He shrugged. "Human engineers had to learn fast after meeting aliens." "We adapt," she smiled softly. "That is what makes your kind dangerous. Not your strength, but your refusal to stop." Daniel laughed quietly. "That's the nicest way anyone's called me stubborn." After hours of searching, a message appeared on the cracked screen, an intercepted signal marked with a rebel encryption code. Daniel decrypted it line by line until a name appeared. "Lord Thalric." Solara froze. "That cannot be." Daniel turned to her. "He was your groom, right?" "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "But he couldn't have." "He was there at the altar." Daniel leaned closer. "He staged it. He planned the attack so he could blame the rebels and seize power. He wanted to start the war himself." Solara's eyes darkened. "He destroyed my world. To crown himself emperor." She stepped back, shaking, fury and grief burning in her chest. "My people will follow him, believing he fights for them. And I will be their enemy." Daniel touched her shoulder gently. "Then we show them the truth." She looked up, her expression hardening. "How?" Daniel pointed to the terminal. "That message and its proof. We need to broadcast it across the network before Thalric blocks every channel." Solara nodded slowly. "Then we go back." They left the frozen moon aboard the same small ship, heading toward the capital system's relay station, the main hub connecting Eldoreth's communication grid to the rest of the galaxy. But the trip was dangerous. Rebel patrols roamed the sector, and Thalric's fleet had already begun lockdown procedures. Daniel worked silently, focusing on navigation. Solara sat beside him, her hands clasped together. I never thought a human would risk his life for an alien princess. He glanced at her. I didn't think I'd be saving a vampire bride at a wedding either. Guess we both had strange plans tonight. She smiled faintly. You are different from the others of your species. When I looked at you during the ceremony, I saw something I could not name. He met her gaze. Maybe you saw someone who refuses to kneel. There was a moment of silence, mine soft, heavy, unspoken. Then the ship's alarm blared. Contact. Multiple ships incoming. Daniel shouted. They found us. 3 crimson fighters appeared behind them, closing fast. Daniel threw the ship into a spin, diving toward the relay's shadow. The fighters fired plasma bursts, shaking the hull. Solara gripped the seat. We cannot outrun them. Daniel gritted his teeth. We don't need to. We just need to crash well. He aimed for the relay's docking ring and fired the thrusters at full power. The ship slammed into the station, scraping metal and bursting through an emergency gate. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, but they were alive. When the smoke cleared, Daniel coughed and looked at Solara. You okay? She nodded, unsteady. I think so. Good. Because now comes the hard part. The relay station was massive, endless corridors filled with machinery, humming with power. They moved fast, hiding behind cargo crates and maintenance tubes. The air was heavy with the sound of distant patrols. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a huge room filled with glowing data pillars. The control console stood in the center, surrounded by energy shields. Daniel started typing commands. Once this goes out, the whole galaxy will see the truth. Solara watched him, then turned suddenly as the doors opened behind them. Lord Thalric stepped inside. His armor gleamed black and red, eyes burning like twin suns. Around him stood his elite guards, weapons raised. Did you really think you could hide from me, my bride? He said coldly. Solara's voice trembled, but she stood tall. You murdered our people. You turned my wedding into slaughter. Thalric smiled faintly. Sacrifice is the cost of power. You should thank me. I will build an empire strong enough to rule the stars. Daniel stepped forward. You're not building anything. You're just burning everything to feel like a god. Thalric's eyes narrowed. And what is a human doing in our affairs? This is not your war. Daniel raised his chin. It is now. Thalric raised his hand, energy crackling around his fingers. Then die with her. He fired a crimson blast. Daniel rolled aside, the beam scorching the console. Sparks flew. Solara lifted her hands, catching the next blast midair, her eyes glowing bright red. Energy screamed between them, light against shadow. Thalric snarled. You would raise power against your own kind? Solara's voice broke through the noise. You are not my kind anymore. Daniel seized the moment. He leapt toward the console, slammed the final command key, and hit transmit. A beam of light shot upward, carrying the message. The proof and every word of Thalric's betrayal across the galactic network. Every screen in the Empire would see his treachery. Thalric roared in fury and struck Daniel across the chest with a wave of force, sending him crashing into the wall. Blood dripped from his lip, but he forced a grin. Too late. Solara unleashed her full power. Crimson light burst from her body, flooding the chamber. Thalric staggered, shielding his face. Then, with a scream, she drove him back into the energy core. There was a flash, a shockwave that shattered the walls. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor, smoke all around. The chamber was in ruins. Thalric was gone, vaporized in the blast. Solara knelt nearby, trembling, her glow fading. Daniel crawled toward her. Hey, you still with me? She smiled weakly. You humans never stop fighting, do you? He chuckled softly. You noticed. Outside the station, emergency ships arrived. Loyalists who had seen the broadcast. Across the Empire, Thalric's image was being condemned. The truth had spread faster than his lies could die. Solara looked out the window, her world once again visible beyond the stars. Perhaps. There is hope now. Daniel nodded. Hope's the one thing humans never run out of. She turned to him, her eyes soft. What will you do now? He shrugged. I guess I'll go home. Or whatever's left of it. Solara reached out her hand. The same gesture she'd made at the wedding, now filled with quiet strength. Stay a while longer. Help me rebuild. I will need allies who believe in more than blood. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then smiled and took her hand. Her fingers were still cold, but this time, they felt alive. As the two stood together in the light of a new dawn, the people of Eldereth began to rise from the ashes. A new chapter was beginning, one where a human's courage and a vampire princess's heart would change the fate of a galaxy forever. End of Part 2. A Human at an Alien Royal Wedding, Part 1. The stars above the world of Eldereth burned red and gold, their light falling across marble towers and silver bridges that floated above the dark seas. It was a world of ancient beauty, home of the Varkari, a proud alien race with pale skin, luminous eyes, and a taste for blood energy drawn from other species, not by cruelty but by old custom. And today, Eldereth celebrated a royal wedding. Every major world in the Galactic Council had sent representatives to witness the union between Princess Solara Varkari, heir to the Crimson Throne, and Lord Thalric, a noble from the neighboring Star Empire. This marriage was supposed to end centuries of rivalry. It was politics disguised as love. Among the many guests from across the stars stood one being who clearly did not belong, a human. His name was Captain Daniel Reeve, decorated veteran of the Orion Wars, now a quiet envoy from Earth. Humans were still new to the grand stage of galactic diplomacy. Most species saw them as unpredictable, too emotional, too fragile, too reckless. Daniel didn't care. He'd seen worse than alien stares. He stood near the back of the massive hall, dressed in a black diplomatic suit trimmed with silver, a small Earth flag on his chest. He had no real reason to be there except to represent humanity, but that alone made his presence strange enough. The hall shimmered with dark red crystal walls. The ceiling arched high like cathedral glass, glowing with energy. 1,000 alien nobles whispered as the music started, low tones from instruments that sounded like singing metal. Then, the bride entered. Princess Solara walked down the crystal aisle, her long gown shimmering like liquid starlight. Her skin was pale silver, her hair black as the void, and her eyes glowed faintly red, a mark of her lineage. Around her neck hung a crown of dark thorns and jewels that pulsed faintly with energy. Everyone bowed as she passed, everyone except Daniel, who watched quietly. There was sadness in her eyes, the kind that doesn't belong at a wedding. When Solara reached the altar, she looked at Lord Thalric. He was tall, sharp-faced, coldly handsome. He smiled, but his smile was empty. To him, this was duty, not devotion. The priest of the Varkari began the old ritual, chanting in a tongue that echoed like wind in a tomb. Then came the part that made Daniel uneasy, the binding drink. Each partner had to share a cup of blood energy from the other's lineage, symbolizing unity and power. Solara hesitated before lifting the chalice. Her eyes flicked just for a moment across the crowd and landed on Daniel. The human met her gaze. For reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't look away. She looked at him as if seeing someone who still remembered what freedom felt like. The music swelled. She raised the cup. And then something strange happened. The lights dimmed. A ripple of dark energy flowed through the hall. The priest stopped mid-chant, startled. The cup trembled in Solara's hand. Then, from above, the great chandelier shattered, not by accident, but by force. An explosion rocked the hall. Panic erupted. Guards drew their weapons. Alien nobles screamed. The floor split open as shadowy figures leapt from the cracks, rebels wearing cloaks of crimson and bone, attacking with energy blades. The wedding had become an ambush. Daniel's instincts kicked in before thought. He dove behind a fallen table as plasma bolts burned through the air. His training from Earth's Marine Corps came flooding back. He grabbed a ceremonial guard's weapon, a long plasma spear, and rolled into cover. Through the chaos, he saw Solara being pulled by guards toward the back corridor. But one of the rebels struck down her escort and raised a blade toward her. Without thinking, Daniel sprinted forward. He struck hard, his human muscles pushing the alien weapon like a battering ram. The plasma spear cracked against the rebel's armor, throwing him across the floor. Solara turned, shocked. "You human?" "No time," Daniel said, offering his hand. "Move." They ran through smoke and fire as more rebels poured in. The palace security fought fiercely, but the attackers were fast and brutal, almost like shadows given flesh. Daniel and Solara ducked into a narrow passage lit by pulsing red lights. The sounds of battle echoed behind them. Screams, explosions, the crash of glass. They reached a sealed door, but the control panel was fried. Daniel knelt and tore a wire bundle open, muttering to himself. Old design. I can bypass it. Solara watched him, her eyes wide. You are not of our kind. Yet you fight for me? Daniel smirked slightly. You looked like you needed help. That's good enough. The door hissed open, leading to an old maintenance corridor. They stepped inside, moving quickly through the dim light. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Solara asked quietly, why did they send a human to this wedding? Daniel shrugged. Diplomatic token, I guess. Humans like to show up where we don't belong. She gave a faint, sad smile. Perhaps you belong here more than you think. They reached a narrow balcony overlooking the burning city below. From here, they could see the palace guards fighting in the streets against the rebels. Smoke rose in crimson spirals. Solara gripped the rail. They've come for me. The Crimson Rebels. They believe my family has betrayed our people. They think I will lead them if I am freed from the throne. Daniel looked at her. And will you? She turned toward him, her eyes glowing faintly. No, I only wish to end this bloodline war. But I am trapped in it, Daniel sighed. Sounds familiar. Humans have a habit of making wars they can't escape either. For the first time, she looked at him not as an outsider, but as someone who understood. You speak like someone who has seen death. He nodded slowly. Too much of it. A sudden explosion below made the balcony tremble. A rebel ship was approaching. Small, fast, with boarding claws extended. They've found us, Daniel said. We need to move. Solara turned, but before they could run, a massive figure landed on the balcony. A rebel commander clad in crimson armor. His voice was deep and cold. Princess Solara, the Crimson Order welcomes you home. Solara stepped back, glaring. You have no home left to offer. Daniel raised the plasma spear. Back off, the commander laughed. A human. How quaint, he lunged. The blow was fast. Too fast for most species. But Daniel moved just in time, ducking under and striking upward. The spear cut through the alien's armor, sparks flying. The commander snarled, backhanding Daniel across the chest. Pain flared, but the human didn't fall. He gritted his teeth, swung again, and drove the spear into the alien's chest plate. The weapon shattered, but the force pushed the commander to the edge of the balcony. Solara lifted her hand. Her eyes glowed red, but instead of draining energy, she unleashed it. A wave of crimson light burst from her palm, hurling the commander into the void below. Daniel stared. Remind me never to make you angry. She looked down, breathing hard. You should not have helped me. They will hunt you now, too. Story of my life, Daniel said, dusting himself off. Come on, let's find somewhere safe. They made their way through the burning corridors. The palace had become a battlefield. In one hallway, they found refugees, servants, children, and wounded guards. Daniel immediately began helping them move toward safety. Solara watched as he lifted rubble and carried a wounded alien guard over his shoulder. She'd never seen anyone, especially from another species, act without rank or reward. You help even those not of your world, she said softly. Daniel smiled tiredly. People are people. When they finally reached an evacuation platform, Solara paused before stepping aboard. The night sky above Eldorath burned with fire. Ships exploding, towers falling. She turned to Daniel. Come with me, he hesitated. I thought you had your own people to protect. They will not follow me if they think I have allied with outsiders, she said quietly. But I will not survive alone. You saw me when no one else did. Daniel looked at her, at the strange mix of power and sorrow in her eyes. And where exactly are we going? Somewhere I can think. Somewhere far from this throne of blood. She held out her hand. Daniel stared at it for a moment. The pale, delicate fingers of an alien princess. The faint glow beneath her skin. Around them, the chaos of war thundered. But in that instant, the world seemed still. Then slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cold, but her grip was strong. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Human and vampire. Soldier and princess. Two beings who should never have met, standing together while an empire burned behind them. As the evacuation ship rose into the red night, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Not fear, but purpose. He didn't know where this strange journey would lead. But one thing was clear. Humanity's courage had just